Hey everybody, it's Never. And today I wanted to talk about the biggest problem in World of Warcraft. The biggest problem in the whole game. See, the funny thing is it's kind of a paradox, because the biggest problem is also what makes the game so fun. It's kind of like, it's like what they say about blood. Blood is one of the things keeping you alive, but it's also slowly killing you, and I'm not really sure about the physiology of that, but some people say it. So, what is the biggest problem in WoW that also makes the game fun? It's something called progression. You see, as we keep playing the game, we realize that we can get better stuff and go do bigger and more amazing things, and the chance of making your character better is what keeps you playing for a lot of people, and I think for everybody in some way or another. But progression also has a lot of side effects that are causing some problems in the game, like stat inflation. Some of you may have heard that there was recently a stat squish. And what that means is that they had to reduce the numbers of stats for a lot of things because the game engine simply couldn't handle it. If you look at the heroic version, or now mythic version of Siege of Orgrimmar, before the stat squish, they had to have Garrosh Hellscream reset his health bar twice during the fight because the engine could not handle a character with over 1 billion health. So they found ways to work around it, but inevitably they just had to fix it by doing the stat squish. And the problem is, this will happen again. Blizzard's even said in a recent interview that I don't have a link to, but you can find it if you look, that they would need to do another stat squish in a few years, which means they'll eventually need to do another and another. And that's more trouble and more development overhead every time it needs to be done. Some other little problems that are related to this are that as you progress, most of the content in the game becomes outdated and pretty much useless over time. Leveling takes longer every expansion, and it gets sped up to remain consistent with the amount of time it takes to level, which means you skip even more content, which makes even more of it irrelevant and useless. And furthermore, players, either they take a long time to catch up to their friends and play if they're coming back to the game or just starting, or they boost to a level that's almost max level and they hit the ground running and they don't really know what they're doing. So all of this stuff together, how can this be fixed? How do we fix and work around this paradox how do we fix the biggest problem of the side effects of progression without just removing progression, which is the thing that makes the game fun and interesting in the first place? Well, there's a way to do this, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about this for the past few months actually, ever since I heard about doing a stat squish. And I've come up with 3 versions of it. I call them soft, medium, and hardcore, to be really appropriate with my terminology. So, soft. Imagine Warlords of Draenor is almost over. The game would change a little bit. What we would do is levels 1 to 100 would stay the same as they are. Those are the levels, and they would always be the levels. New content comes out, and it's built entirely around level 100. And it would be just like we do with like Isle of Thunder coming out, or Tanan Jungle whenever they release it, or Isle of Kel'Danas. It's stuff meant for max level, and the only increase in power was through items. So when this happens, let's say that the end of Warlords of Draenor is item level 700, and that's the best stuff in Warlords of Draenor. So in this new expansion, we'd go from item level 700 to, let's say, item level 800. It's probably going to be more than that, but we'll just keep the math easy. So item levels 700 to 800 those are the progression levels, that's the new stuff. And that happens all throughout expansion 7.0, and it's a full expansion's worth of stuff that happens but doesn't increase player level. The progression's only through gear from item level 700 to 800. So we do that for an expansion. When expansion 8.0 comes out, then 7.0 is dropped an entire expansion's item level. So the 700 to 800 items suddenly become 600 to 700 items. And all of the NPCs are scaled down in accordance with it. And that's the only change that needs to happen. So suddenly expansion 7 is on equal footing with the endgame content from Warlords of Draenor. They're pretty much equal at that point. So, and then everything in 8.0 is now the new 700 to 800. And we do that for the entire expansion, and then when 9.0 comes out, 8.0 drops down, becomes 600 to 700, and 9.0 is 700 to 800. And we do this over and over again forever. And it allows an infinite number of expansions to come out without ever having to adjust or squish stats, because all we do is dial back the clock on item levels once per expansion. Now, some people might be thinking, well, but that doesn't seem very fun, or it might seem like we're taking away too much reward from players, but ultimately, has the stat squish bothered you? Do the numbers you see on your screen really make a big difference to you? It hasn't bothered me at all, and in fact, I think it's kind of nice, because if we were to repeat the same range of numbers again, I would have a better idea of where I am, and it would be easier to balance classes against one another because things stay consistent for longer. So the technology to do this largely already exists in the game. It's demonstrated by how heirloom items work and how scaling of raids works. This isn't completely new stuff and might be easier to do than we think. Maybe not. I'm not inside of Blizzard's teams, but the precedents for it look to be there. So that's the soft version. The medium version takes it a little farther. So the whole game up to level 100, instead of being spread out on one long linear progression as it is, instead is sort of normalized. So you take it by continents essentially. And let's say we still have level 100 to make the math easy, but let's say that if you do all the questing in Kalimdor from beginning to end, that'll take you all the way to level 100. Or you could do Eastern Kingdoms and it would take you all the way up to 100. Or you could do Outland and it goes from level 1 to level 100. Maybe more like level 5 or 10 just because of that whole starting zone thing. And you could choose any continent, basically any expansion in the game, to get your character from 1 to 100. And then that's all equal. The endgame content for each expansion and for vanilla would all be on par with one another with reward quality and with difficulty. And so then when a new expansion comes out, it would start where the others leave off. So let's say that levels 1 to 100 also contain item levels 0 to 200. So then the new expansion would be item levels 200 to 300. And so when Warlords of Draenor goes right down there with the others in legacy status, and the new expansion is 200 to 300. So and that would be expansion 7.0. When 8.0 comes out, 7.0 drops down and becomes essentially like 100 to 200 because it's a max level only sort of deal, as we discussed before. And then the expansion 8.0 becomes the new 200 to 300. And then when 9.0 comes out, then 8.0 drops down to legacy and 9.0 becomes 200 to 300. And again, we have infinite amount of expansions that can progress forever by resetting the item levels each time, and we still have progression, but we don't have the side effects from it. This causes some other really nice things to happen. First of all, it gives a very solid, consistent leveling experience and a variety of ways to level, so that if you need to level a new character, you don't have to worry about going through all of the old stuff in the game every time. You would be able to see an entire expansion's worth of content to level your character up, because there would be that much you need to do to get you through that many levels. This also lends itself to easier class balance, easier difficulty balance, because it's wide across the entire game, and then it's just new expansions that are planned to adjust at the end of their cycle. This also gives us a lot more options for other stuff we can do. Like, imagine having 5-man heroic versions of some of the old raids, because they would all be on par with one another. So Blackwing Lair could be on par with Ruby Sanctum or Icecrown Citadel, and it could be on par with Sunwell. And those things could suddenly become something like a level 100 normal mode dungeon is now. And there could be some fun things to do with those. Wouldn't it be cool to have 5 or 10-man challenge mode versions of old raids or even old dungeons for some cool rewards? Because if we know that the max level is never going to increase and that the power level is just going to scale back down every expansion, challenge modes could stay in the game indefinitely. It means that content doesn't expire. It stays useful and it stays relevant no matter how many expansions come out. But what if we took this whole thing further? So this is where I'm going to start getting a little crazy, and you can go tinfoil hat mode on me if you want to. But there's a staple of RPGs that we take for granted. And we feel that we must have it because it's always been there. But the truth is, we don't need it. It's there in plain sight, staring us in the face, but we don't need it. It's something called levels. Now, before you start spouting vile blasphemy against the spirit of RPGs, hear me out. We don't need character levels. We don't. Because what are they there to do? They serve essentially three purposes. First, they make your character more powerful as you gain them. Second, they allow you to gradually unlock your character's abilities so that you don't have them all thrown at you at once. And finally, third, they allow you to gain power. That's it. It's just an arbitrary or artificial sense of progression. So, if we don't have character levels, how do we measure how strong your character is? Well, the thing is, we actually still could have levels, but in a different way. Because we measure character strength through item level now. And if we wanted to maintain levels, what if your item level divided by 10 was your character level? Suddenly it means something different. If I were to look at my character now and my item level is, what is it? My item level is 650, then my character level is essentially 65. But somebody who is a little more geared than me, well, what if their effective level is 66? I know that they're a little bit stronger than me. And suddenly level means something. Instead of just, oh, you're at the end of the game too. Cool. So levels would take on a different meaning, but if we got rid of them as we know them as far as a scale to grow your character up and gate them, then what does the game look like after that? Well, it actually looks pretty awesome. The whole game is tuned for one level, and that's max level. There is one level, essentially. All characters start at max level. You would have your starting zone, which would be the tutorial, and that would teach you to play your class, gradually unlock your abilities through the first, what would be equivalent to the first 5 to 10 levels, but essentially the first couple of zones that you do, and then you're there, and the whole rest of the game is tuned to one level, and you increase your power through items. All progression would be done through items, just as it's already done in endgame stuff. The difference really isn't that bad. Even if you were fully raid geared, remember being geared from Siege of Orgrimmar or from the end season of Mists of Pandaria and PvP gear and killing mobs in Vale of Eternal Blossoms? It really wasn't that bad. It's still enjoyable, but not that hard, but the difficulty could vary by zone. And so it would still give you a lot of variety, but then the entire game is relevant and useful again. I mean, when was the last time anyone really felt like they needed to go to Stone Talon Mountains for something other than nostalgia or RP if you weren't leveling a character? What if many of the old quests were repeatable? What if Gordo's task suddenly became a daily quest, and you could go and do that once a day and get some sort of credit? What if there was a big quest that said, go do 15 repeatable or 15 daily quests from anywhere, and you do that and you get your Apexis crystals or whatever the currency for the current expansion would be? Suddenly you've got people going all over the map to do stuff because they're going places they want to. Or it could be like, today is Stone Talon Mountains Day. There's a bonus reward if you do your daily quests in Stone Talon Mountains by doing any of the quests that are already there. Again, suddenly stuff is useful again. World PvP would happen a lot more, and guess what? It would all be balanced around one level. So people would be going all over the map, and they'd be running into only people that are at least somewhat within the realm of difficulty for them. The game could then be expanded in any zone. If we want to put more content in Dustswallow Marsh, we don't have to worry about it being content that's appropriate for the level of that zone. It just simply needs to be content because everything's balanced around one level. And because every new expansion would be built for that same single level, we wouldn't need to worry about stuff getting too difficult or expiring, because the new stuff for the expansion would just be a further tier of item levels than the old stuff. And every time a new expansion comes out, the old stuff drops back an entire expansion's worth of item levels, and then the new stuff starts on the same scale just like it is in the other two models I mentioned. So that's the whole idea in 3 different parts. Now, which of these approaches is right? Is soft right, where we essentially leave the game alone as it is and just handle new expansions in a different way? Or medium, where we squish the existing game down into one tier and then handle new expansions in a new way? Or where we turn everything into the way that we would handle new expansions and make the game fully accessible and fully relevant all over again? Maybe the 3 of them are all phases of one big plan. I don't know. I hope I've explained this idea, or these facets of this idea to you in a way that's comprehensible, because I know it's a lot of information to take in, and I may not have explained it that well. If you have any questions about it, please leave a comment. If you can see any holes in this idea, I would love to hear them, because I've gone over this a lot of times, and it seems pretty rock solid in my head, but then again, I would be more intrigued by something that makes it not work than by just a bunch of pats on the back, as I've explained before about beta readers and how if they say something's wrong in your story, they're almost always right, but if they try and tell you how to fix it, they're almost always wrong. The criticism and the negative feedback about what doesn't work is often the most useful. So if you have other ideas for how to fix the biggest problem in World of Warcraft, or even how to fix any other problems, please leave a comment and let me know. Thanks for watching. I hope this idea is interesting to you, and I'd love to hear what you have to say. Okay, thanks, bye.